Okay, so my name is Elise. Thank you again for everybody joining us. It's so awesome to have you guys here on our panel to discuss the 2018 trends for customer success and customer experience. So going ahead with that, Nicolle, can you start off with an introduction about yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Nicolle Paridise. I am Senior Director of Client Experience for ADP. So I spend my days thinking about how clients are experiencing their end-to-end journey with us, the aggregate of the experience. And I spend my time thinking about how do we understand that from the listening, how do we measure it, and then how do we improve it for our clients.
Great. Allison, what about you?
Hi everyone, I'm Allison Pickens. I'm Chief Customer Officer at Gainsight, which is a customer success software company. I've been at Gainsight about 4 years, and I'm coming earlier in my career from a management consulting and investing background. Over the past 4 years, I've helped build out another number of functions at Gainsight, and really excited to be here today.
Thanks a lot. Dave.
Hi everyone, Dave Blake. I'm founder and CEO of ClientSuccess. We're also a customer success management platform. It's a pleasure to be here with Allison and Nicolle, two great thought leaders. And prior to founding ClientSuccess, I ran customer success at Adobe for the enterprise and strategic accounts, and a company called Omniture as well.
So starting off with the first question, what are the best practices and ideas you'd like to share regarding customer experience and customer success process and team maturity with a specific emphasis on modeling customer health? I'd like to go to Allison first, if you could give some insight.
Sure, it's a broad question. Probably we could talk for hours just about this one. I'll zoom in on one thing you said, which is how do you think about measuring customer health? And it's interesting. I think in the early days, we thought of a health score as being, for the most part, like a singular measure. It started out where people said, well, we need to have code red meetings, and we need to be able to mark customers who are in some state of risk as red. And then over time, people said, actually, there are probably a few different dimensions on which a customer could be healthy or not. So we're going to have maybe 5 or 8 different scorecard measures, and we're going to do a weighted average across them to come up with the overall score. And I think more recently folks have realized actually how even that is not sufficient. And really as we've become a lot more sophisticated, we have a better understanding of the success we're trying to drive for customers, and we're able to access lots of different data. Actually, we realize that there's probably a broader framework that we can use for health scores. And in a nutshell at Gainsight, we tend to use the equation customer success equals customer outcomes plus customer experience. So CS equals CO plus CX, kind of a catchy equation. And the idea is that, on the left-hand side of the equation, CS, this is about the benefits to us as a vendor from having a CS program. We're going to get higher retention, higher expansion, higher new logo growth through advocacy. We want to have scorecards for each of those to understand is this client likely to renew? Are they likely to expand? And are they likely to advocate for us?
At this point of the interview, we had a problem with audio, which only lasted for about a minute. But Allison went on to say, and on the right-hand side of the equation, we are going to have a certain set of scorecard measures that approximate whether the customer is actually achieving outcomes. And we're going to have another scorecard that helps to measure certain aspects of the client experience. So, to answer your question about maturity, this is really a higher maturity of customer success organization, and no one expects you'll get there overnight. But I think that broadly, this is what we should aim for. After this, Dave replied to Allison's comments and said, maybe also to add on to what Allison said, it's important to take a multidimensional approach to a health score report. A lot of people are relying on just 1 or 2 metrics.
And so I think it's important to have a data-driven insights around customer health as well as human insights around customer health, and bring those together in the aggregate to have a true picture of health. And that's really important. We see a lot of people make the mistake of looking at product usage, for example, as their primary metric of health. But if you're a product that is used every day and they're still not happy with you, you could see the product usage cliff immediately when they switch to a new vendor. So taking a multi-pronged approach, multi-dimensional approach is really important. And to where possible, even including the insights from the team that's engaged with the customer.
Yeah, to sort of jump into some of the other comments, I think one of the questions that you asked that was particularly interesting was around the process. And so as a strategist, I tend to zoom out and think, okay, step one, what are we solving for in that process? And so I think the answer to that first is this cultural shift of having ourselves and our clients or our CS teams think like a customer. And so what I mean by that is that the present state is us having this inside out point of view where we think about clients from our journey of acquisition, adoption, onboarding, expansion, renewal. And while that's valid, I think how we expand and mature our process is to switch that a little bit and have an outside-in perspective, meaning what is the customer's journey with us and how do we listen to them? And so when I think about maturing teams and when I think about implementing processes, I know that the current way of thinking is our journey. I think the opportunity is if we can empower our CSMs all the way up to our executive team to first think like a customer, then we're going to do a couple things. We're going to think about the data we already have, which is the historical data, and Allison is spot on. We tend to look at, or we as an industry have tended to look at these siloed metrics as the health score. And she's absolutely right. We need to be thinking about the fact that one, those are often lagging indicators. And two, our customers have these views of us that can be that inside out. And so the maturity opportunity is to say, how do we think like them? How do we listen to them? And then adopt that into our maturing process. So ways that we listen to customers. We have our net promoter score systems. We have our customer effort scores. We have our customer satisfaction. And as we aggregate what customers are saying into our existing somewhat immature model of we think about acquisition, retention, expansion, renewal, I think that holistic view of the customer's journey is a huge opportunity. It empowers our CSMs. It empowers us all the way up to the executive suite to really think like a customer. And I think that that is a huge opportunity for leveraging the data we already have and having 2018 really be data as the year of the customer point of view.
That's definitely a part of our questions, and I think we can get to that next with the second question. Andy?
Yeah, so the main topic obviously is trying to foresee like trends for 2018, and specifically in your opinion, obviously, what are the main areas customer success managers and customer experience experts will need to focus on in 2018? Nicolle, I would start with you if you don't mind.
Sure, thanks. As I think about what we need to focus on over the years, I've used this model that I call the LAP model. So it's the listen, action, and then pilot. Back to our conversation about the aggregate of data, I think if we are really listening to all of the data that we have and listening to what clients are telling us about kind of what they want, the lagging indicators of data, the leading indicators that we tend to get through mapping the journey of our clients, all of that in aggregate allows us to create a certain action. And that action comes from that journey mapping process of, if I know what they're experiencing, which is I've listened to the historical data and I'm listening to what they're telling me now through some of those the surveys and the voice of the client listening posts that we were just chatting about, there's an opportunity then to really action on it. And that action is, how do we understand the end-to-end experience of the client, empower not just our CS teams, but our culture at any company to say the center of what we do is our clients. Our entire purpose is to serve them because that's what makes us profitable, right? And that actioning on that allows us to then move to the P, which is pilot. Here's what we think we know. let's take a couple, whatever our data set suggests. If you're an organization like mine, which has 600 and some thousand clients worldwide, our pilot might be different than some of the startup SaaS companies who would have 3 or 4. That the quantity doesn't matter. It's piloting what the data and the market is telling us in order to be successful, and then starting that lap cycle again. What we learn, we start to listen, action, pilot, and then eventually we wind up maturing in a much different space for 2018 because we are taking that client centricity and putting that at scale. I would also say that there's a certain level of empathy that happens culturally when we're applying this LAP model. By actually listening to our customers, there is a level of empathy that comes from what they experience in our end-to-end journey. And make no mistake, empathy is not about hugging our clients, right? I've said before that having empathy for what our clients experience and their friction points directly leads to a certain level of loyalty. When someone listens to us personally or professionally and actions on those pain points, there is a level of loyalty. And that loyalty leads to advocacy. They're going to go tell other clients, these folks listened to me and understand why I bought their product in the first place and what I'm spending money on. And that advocacy then leads to loyalty. And that loyalty and retention is how we drive efficiencies, how we guard against attrition, churn, kind of all of our internal goals and our internal KPIs. We do that through that LAP process of listening, actioning, and then piloting what we think is right out to the market.
Yeah, and a part of what I love what you said was really making customer success a company-wide effort. And I think that's one area that CSMs should really be focusing on.
Yeah, I love Nicole's LAP model, and I agree with you, Elise, that we always say customer success is a culture, not a department. And in order to make that happen, you have to break down the internal silos. Every functional group in an organization is used to working within their box, if you will, or their silo. And really, I still believe that there needs to be more done of breaking down the silos and collaborating cross-functionally for the customer. One thing that I had a good experience with at Adobe was that we created this program called the Customer Immersion Program. And what we did is we required all senior leaders to go through a 2-day experience that walked in the shoes of the customer. From looking at our website to reviewing contracts that are signed, to using our products, to interviewing customers, to being on support calls. And that program transformed Adobe in many ways because for the first time, our senior leadership team across the board, and this was 80 to 100 leaders, had empathy for customers. You could see as they went through this program and they listened in on support calls or tried to use our product, in different scenarios, that they started feeling the pain that our customers were feeling, that we weren't a very good and easy business to work with. And out of that program, we had transformational change throughout the organization. We saw in every internal meeting and town hall, we talked about customer experience and customer success. But more so, we mobilized cross-functional teams and drove insights, accountabilities, and actions that took care of our customer. And so I would really highly recommend considering implementing a program like that, which was a great program in the Customer Immersion Program.
Allison, what do you see in the future? So what can you tell us about upcoming trends in customer success and customer experience?
Yeah, the number one theme that I've been hearing over the past few months is about advocacy. Folks, first of all, think that more than ever, the role of CSM necessarily entails turning great customer outcomes and experiences into real advocates that help pave the way for faster sales cycles and higher prices. And interestingly enough, I'm seeing actually a lot of sales leaders catch on to this fact. So you're hearing sales leaders talk about putting advocacy into the comp of any CSMs that might be reporting to them. You're hearing sales and other types of leaders talking about their growth stack of technology, which includes customer success solutions, as well as reference management and other types of advocacy incentive programs. And, I think a lot of CFOs are catching on to the fact that you can start to justify more budget invested in customer success management if you're not just funding it with increased retention rates, but also funding it with, and also not just expansion rates, but potentially with stronger new logo growth. And I think we'll be able to tell whether this trend is really lasting and sustainable when sales reps are willing to take on higher quotas because they're willing to have more help from customer success management. It's really interesting. In Q3 of this past year, we did our first analysis where we looked at the percentage of new logo annual recurring revenue that came from repeat purchasers of our product. Basically, people who had bought Gainsight at one company and then had moved into a new job at a second company and then decided to buy Gainsight again, which is probably not a perfect predictor of whether they had a great experience the first time, but probably a really good indicator. And actually, we found that a third of our new logo ARR came from repeat purchasers. So that's the kind of data point that our CFO gets really excited about, that I can leverage in our budgeting process, and so that's what we're pounding the pavement about nowadays internally, and then also in our community.
Yeah, as a marketer, it really hurts, but it's true. Customer success can generate a lot more leads and more loyal leads, actually.
Well, I'd love to comment on that because our chief marketing officer, Anthony, and I talk about this a lot. I think when you have customer success playing a role where it's generating pipeline in a sense, or at least like influencing or heavily contributing to pipeline, it starts to call into question attribution models. Now, interestingly, marketing's been trying to deal with the problem of attribution for a long time, and I don't think they've totally fixed it either, right? I mean, there are always contestations about, whether it was the sales rep who drove the deal or whether it was the fact that a prospect, went to a marketing event. And what we talked about in our executive team just a couple of weeks ago is actually it's the combination of all of these things that helps make an effective sales cycle. So maybe we need to be moving to a model that's a little less focused on silos and what metric each department can claim 100% credit for, and more about looking at the cross-functional playbook of top of the funnel marketing, blog posts, middle of the funnel marketing, events, sales outreaches, value consulting workshops, customer success getting involved early on. Like it's the combination of all these things, the effective orchestration of it, that results in stronger growth. So now that's a mind shift, right? So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the next year.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and just adding on, I think it's really important that we focus on what Allison just said, because the very notion, to her point, that we all have in all of our organizations, which are distinct silos, make no mistake, the client journey is experiencing that. And there's not probably been a company that any of us have ever worked at that at some point a customer doesn't say, okay, I got one number to call for this thing. I got another number to call for this other thing. And while some of those silos are valuable, I think ultimately the compensation packages of folks internally, the client will experience those really rigid silos of the difference between how your CCO is measured versus how your CMO is measured. And I think there's a really interesting cultural conversation that Allison's going to help a lot of us drive, which is, if that is how we behave internally, how is that not impacting what the client experiences, and thus how they want to spend more money with us, because they're sensing a commission breath, but they're not really sure who's got their best interest in mind. So I think that's a really excellent point from Allison.
So Dave, going back on what you earlier said about advocacy, I just wanted to ask you and the rest of the panelists what innovations you think will particularly be important going forward into 2018 that could drive this advocacy more, or any other trend you see within 2018.
Yeah, I think I would kind of go back to what Nicolle said, is taking this outside-in approach. And I think it's most people, when they do their journey mappings, when they build out their strategy, It's all about what they think the customer wants, and it's all about their internal metrics. And I think the innovation in 2018 is continuing to look at engaging with the customers on a deeper level to understand their perspective and aligning the organization around their needs and their outcomes. I had an experience with this in the past life where internally at a former company, there were a lot of bugs that were piling up from a customer, and customers were pretty frustrated. And so the engineering team and the leadership team took ownership and said, okay, we're going to build all this process and improvement and internal analytics to remove, reduce the number of bugs, because that's what customers are angry at. We then went on site and actually talked to customers. And what the customers said is, we understand that sometimes bugs take a while to resolve. What we're asking for is simply more visibility. Just give us more transparency, because we have to set expectations with our broader organization. And so what we had originally done around internal innovation based on our own perspective was completely missing what the customer's experience or preferences were. Once we understood the customer's experience preferences, then we modified the strategy and had a lot better feedback from our customers. And so the innovation, I think, around customer-centered metrics and continuing to build upon those and execute around those, I think, will be a key thing in 2018.
Nice. Allison, do you have anything to add on top of that? Any other innovations looking forward to 18?
You know, certainly there's a lot of artificial intelligence out there that folks are starting to leverage in their customer-facing motions, particularly in customer support, but I think you'll also start to see this on the customer success side too. You know, I have to be honest, I haven't seen too many super compelling case studies yet of this, and so I think the jury's still out about exactly how AI is going to help folks. But I do think it's something that we'll see a lot of progress in over the next year, and it'll be super interesting to see what happens. One example of a tool I've seen recently is Comico, which actually is kind of a Gmail plugin. You can authorize it to have access to emails, and it'll track all the different interactions you have with different stakeholders at an account. And this becomes interesting because, you know, if it turns out that you're communicating really significantly with one stakeholder, but actually another stakeholder, the client that's quite important, isn't receiving the love, that's something that we can start to highlight. So I think there are going to be a lot of new and interesting data sources and connections that we're going to be able to draw from this.
And maybe can I add to that? I agree with Allison. I think the key in the customer success side with these AI technologies is how can you empower the CSM teams or other teams in the organization with AI that is very authentic. I think that on the customer success, the success side of the business, or broadly dealing with customers, the bar is much higher to leverage AI in a very authentic way, because you already have this deep relationship with customers, a very personal relationship. And they will sniff out, especially if it's a technology that's engaging with customers, they'll sniff out if it's not, very easily, if it's not real and if it's not authentic. So the key to me, as we all innovate around AI and empowering the CSMs, is how do you do that? How do you give them more knowledge? How do you automate a lot of the stuff that they do that's not high value, but do it in a very authentic, personal way, so that your customers essentially feel that authenticity, whether it comes from an AI solution or whether it comes directly from the CSM.
Yeah, it's funny that we see as we go more towards technology, it's kind of forcing us to find ways to become more human. So in a way, it's kind of like a reversal, but it just requires CSMs and customer success professionals to really find ways to connect better with the customer. So.
That's right. And to build on that, I want to double click on something that Dave just said when he was talking about the strategy. And I think it's vital because all of us work inside of some form of data aggregation or proper metadata AI, all of that stuff. And when we think about innovations, and while I might be a bit of an outlier here, there's a methodology that a lot of us have heard of that I have rebranded for my own purposes. So we've all heard about the KISS method, right? The way that I define that is keep it simple and strategic. And what I mean by that is it is really easy to hide behind the next shiny thing. Oh, we're gonna, as a company, go do this big data, this AI, because someone on LinkedIn told me I could probably do that. And to Dave's point, what we can easily stop doing is actually thinking about the client strategy. And so I have two really specific calls to action around that. One, if we are serious about the KISS method, which is keep it simple and strategic, get a placemat of the top 3 things that your company wants to accomplish, just 3, and then be really comfortable in saying no. Have a big no meeting, a big no party, and take everything off that doesn't innovate to those top 3 things that will ultimately benefit your client and your own growth and maturity. Because while it could be interesting to get a whole bunch of data, if you're a company of 7 or a company of 70,000, if you're hiding behind that data and, to Dave's point, not actually talking to your customers and pressure testing this, then you're missing an opportunity, and we're hiding behind the shiny cool thing that we're hearing online, but we're not actually creating an actionable experience that's going to drive revenue not only for our company, but a better experience for the client. So it's the first call to action. The second is pretty simple, and that is if everyone either listening to this exchange or throughout our companies cannot, in 5 seconds or less, name the top 3 pain points that their client base, not their segmentation experiences, then there's really nothing else that would need to happen to innovate until you can name that. And what I mean by that specifically, it is a cultural thing. Every meeting that I am in maps to what we've heard from our clients, the 3 words in rank order of what they think kind of sucks about doing business with us. And there's lots of stuff that people love about your products and my products, but if we're serious about innovating, then we have to fix the stuff that creates tough solutions. And if everyone from our CEO down to our interns who are super excited to get a free can of Sprites on their break, right? Because this is their first job. If every person in the organization can't name in 5 seconds or less the top 3 pain points that clients have dealing with your products and your services, then that's your innovation. Find out what the friction points are and figure out how to make that better for them. Because without that cultural awareness, then to our earlier conversation, what's the point? The so what of maturing our CS and CX organizations? If they can't say the top 3 things, what are we maturing? Our process? Okay, but so what? How does that benefit the client? And if it benefits the client, that's going to benefit our revenue. So those would be the 2 call to actions as we think about keeping it simple and strategic.
Yeah, that's awesome. If I may, I would have one last question for you. How can you prioritize this data? And secondly, how can you attribute a value to subjective metrics, right? So obviously we talked about customer health and so on, but sometimes it's a matter of perception, and how can you actually attribute a value, and how can you use that for analysis? Dave, what do you think?
I think with data, again, keep it focused on the customer and focus on, I like what Nick said, focus on 3 things and make sure everybody has that, and then execute that and move on. As far as subjective data, I'm a big believer in that. I think that if you have a model, there's some models where are very, very low touch, where you can't scale with a lot of individual touch points. But if you have a medium or high touch model, I think it's really important to gather input from the organization. Because as I said earlier, I've seen a lot of situations where a data only approach will give you a false positive or false negative. I had a situation with a strategic account at Adobe where if I would have looked at the data, we would have seen that this large multi-million-dollar company was leaving us. But we had an awesome relationship with that customer, and we were able to provide the context around the data that educated the entire organization. And then we were able to leverage the data to mobilize the organization to make the improvements that were necessary with the user experience. So a combination of both. I would say use them both. Be very focused and make sure that you're spreading that information throughout the organization so that you can empower the rest of the organization, break down silos, and collaborate together for the customer.
Allison?
Well, I definitely think you have to do both, as folks said. So making sure that you have that objective data so that you can have standardization across your customer base, an effective way to communicate with clients, an effective way to level set and set targets with your team, very important. But I think we all believe that the objective data is not the full story. Now, you might imagine a world where we can gather so much data and get so effective at analyzing it that actually it predicts 99% of what our subjective view of the situation would be anyway. I mean, one example of, I think an area that people used to think was subjective was the tone of voice of a client on a call, right? And the CSM is going to have the best perspective on what the tone was, and the data might capture that. Well, interestingly, now there are tools like Gong.io, which is a product that we use, that are starting to analyze conversations, and they can start to point out, what small talk, how long did the small talk occur for, what were the key topics that were brought up, were there negative words that were mentioned, and so pretty soon, actually, we're expanding the realm of data that we can access, and I don't think it would be anyone's expectation that the CSM would be looking at like this vast set of data points, but it's up to software to actually simplify it, as Nicolle said, and help CSMs actually interpret it. But still, I think we're probably a long way from eliminating the need for subjective understanding. And I think people pointed out earlier the importance of just the human element, especially in high-touch customer relationships, where you might be on site with a group of 12 stakeholders. There's so much subjective judgment that's involved in running that meeting and taking action from it. I think my main takeaway is, as the number of data sources replicate and as technology becomes more sophisticated, what it means is not that we're replacing the role of CSM. What it means is that we're able to elevate the CSM to focus on activities that are a lot more meaningful for our clients, and honestly, a lot more enjoyable for them. So I think this is good news for everyone in the industry.
Absolutely, absolutely. Nicolle?
Well, I think my observation would be that's actually step 2. And if we start with step 2, there is a danger that we will confuse movement with progress, because we start solutioning on what the data is. My call to action would be start with step 1. And step 1 is, well, what are you solving for? What do you want to know? Because make no mistake, each company has a pain point. And this goes back to what are the 3 things in force ranked order that your customers are experiencing. Each company has a pain point, and you're not going to get a 10 on quality, speed to market, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So step 1 is, what do we want to know and what do we want to solve for? Maybe where the bodies are buried in your company, and you actually have a quality issue. Then step 2 is, what do we do with all the data that's measurable and subjective? Cool. Go tag that data and look for how are people experiencing your quality, because they might know you have an issue, they might not, and you can fix it before you impact the market. Some companies we've just got to get to operational steadiness. Maybe you've been in business 30, 40 years and growth isn't your strategy. Your strategy is guard against any attrition. Well, good. Then step 2 is, let's look at that data and use all of the cool widgets out there to find out what our customers are thinking or what our action plan needs to be. But I have found throughout my career that if we are not clear on what is the singular question that we want to solve for, the data inundation that happens, that inundation of, there's so many signals that I don't know what the heck to make of it, that creates, as we often joke, this analysis paralysis, where we're just spinning in data because we don't have a strategy. And so So I'm answering your question with a different question, which is cool. First, know what you want to solve for, and then you'll know how to approach the data, how to organize the data, and then we move back to the LAP process. How do we listen to the data? How do we action on it? How do we pilot what we think the data is telling us so we can create effortless experiences for our clients and grow profitability and retention for our own customers, or our own company, I should say.
Excellent. Thanks a lot for joining us, Elise.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was awesome to hear you all speak. I really enjoy loving to hear from you guys, and thank you for participating.
Awesome.
Thank you guys so much. Sorry again for being late.
Thanks for having us.
Allison, Dave, nice to see you both, rock stars.
Thank you, guys.
Feel
Thank
better,
you.
Allison.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Nicole. Thank you, Dave.
Bye-bye.
Bye.